So you're a record collector, like myself. You collect all kinds of music. It might be records, it might be cassettes, it might even be reel to reel, it might be CDs. But in any case, records are back and we're loving them all over again. But what if, like me, you move somewhere across the United States from a big city like Detroit, where I used to hang out, to Midland, Texas? And that's where I find myself today. What'll you do? Where do you shop? How do you keep getting into the hobby that you love so much if you have a hard time getting hold of the hobby itself? That's what happened to me. And we're going to talk about it in this episode of the AV Room. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the AV Room. Today I'm going to be talking about a slightly odd subject that I never thought I'd find myself in the middle of. That's if you collect records, where do you buy them if you move somewhere and there's nowhere to buy them? That's where I found myself. I moved from Michigan to Virginia to California, back to Michigan, and now find myself in Texas. What is this Detroiter doing in Texas? Well, I'll tell you. I moved here because my wife's family moved here and she wanted to be around her family. I get it. I said, sure, whatever. I'm all in. We moved to Texas. Well, actually, she moved before me. I had to pack up and move here because she said, I'm not coming back to Michigan. That being said, it was heading into winter. So I get it. Winter in the East is brutal. So we moved to Texas. And while I admit the weather was much more acceptable and she could enjoy the horse she has, I still found myself in an odd sort of situation. Now I found myself moving from Michigan to West Texas and finding myself in a bit of predicament. Following the pandemic, a lot of us were getting back into music and vinyl in particular. The problem was I no longer lived in a big city, and having moved to Texas, thought upon hearing we're moving to Texas, oh, no problem. There's record stores everywhere in Dallas. There's record stores in Austin. There's record stores in Houston. Guess where there are no record stores? The Permian Basin. Guess where I moved? The Permian Basin. Now, I saw recently a YouTuber who had visited Detroit and hit some record stores and picked up some cool records. It just made me depressed. It made me wish I hadn't left Detroit in the metropolitan area, but I did. And so I don't want to bring my wife down. I wanted to keep buying records. So I started looking at options. What do you do? What do you do when there's no record stores around you? Now, when I first moved here about 6 or 7 years ago, I had moved to Midland. Now, Midland is a small town and doesn't really have any record stores besides a few resale shops. There's a somewhat fair sized one called Entertain Mart. They do sell some new vinyl, but it's really no more than you would find at a Walmart, which we also have, or a Target, which we also have. And I'll go into examples of that. But what I was looking for was a real record store. And people were telling me they used to be here, but they all went out of business. Now, there was one in the nearby town of Odessa, which is about an hour's drive. It's where I work now at a tattoo shop. But back then, I was living in Midland, never really went to Odessa as it was an hour away, and just it wasn't convenient. But I did eventually make the trip out there. And wow, I was in heaven. Finally, a record store, CDs, cassette tapes, rock related t shirts, and posters. It was fantastic. Now, it was a mom and pop, and it was more akin to a head shop kind of vibe with records, CDs, and cassettes. I'm not talking thousands, but they had them. Now, when I went there my very first time, I wasn't expecting to find much, and I didn't. Now, they had some new titles, they had some used records, but it was the only thing I'd been to that wasn't a Target or a Walmart. So I was in heaven. Cut to about a year later, they're closed. They'd now gone out of business. Like so many mom and pops, just couldn't sustain. And after COVID hit, it was even worse. And they just couldn't make it work. So it closed. So now here I am, and they're closed too, which leaves basically, I don't know, I didn't know. So I started looking into what I could do. Here's what I came up with. Now, sure, I could drive to Austin or Houston or Dallas, but I just didn't have the money, nor the time, or the gas money to do any of that. It just wasn't in the cards. I'm an artist. My wife is an artist. We're not exactly dripping with cash, but it's my hobby, and I didn't want to ignore it, and I didn't want to sell the collection I had been building and taking care of. So this is what I did. First, I thought, well, maybe I'll hit some of these resale shops. Maybe I'll hit these church garage sales, that sort of thing. And I did that. Um, I found a lot of stuff like this. Now, this is a background moods, music for every mood, a Reader's Digest box set. Now, it's a cool little box set. I was pretty like, well, it's this or nothing, and so I got it. And you can find a lot of these out there on the market, and it comes with several albums, which I've cleaned and rebagged, and a diagram which takes you through the different moods and assigns an album that you can play for it. Now, while this was neat, and I didn't have it, and I love instrumental music, and I'm a sucker for anything that my grandma or grandpa might have owned at one time, this really wasn't what I was looking for, but I found this at a church and it was okay. And they didn't want too much for it. They wanted more than I wanted to pay, but it was for a church and it was a donation. So I separated my cash from my wallet and I said, all right, I'll do this one. Now, I think at the time I paid them, I want to say $25 for this. You can find it for way less. I've since stumbled across copies for $1 for the whole box set. But this was in good shape. The records are almost mint, never played, and I like it. I'm a weirdo. I have weird music habits. I collect horror movie soundtracks, so this was right up my alley. Calling me crazy. But I bought it. Now that was the churches. So then I thought, well, if that's churches, maybe garage sales, maybe flea markets. Again, there aren't a whole lot of options where I live, and there weren't either one of those options. But I kept hitting up resale shops like Salvation Army this time. And that's where I found this. This was a Sarah Vaughan American Singer box set. Now, it's a pretty cool box set, and I didn't own any Sarah Vaughan. I'm not against it. Records were from a Book of the Month club, and it's several albums, and comes with this booklet which walks you through her career and actually has in the back notes about the songs. And then this was interesting. This says cassette number one, cassette number two. This side says 8 track, cartridge number one, cartridge number two. So you could buy this and get it in vinyl, cassette, or even 8 track. How about that? I don't say anything about reel to reel. I would have definitely been down for a reel to reel. But I found this LP box set. Now, again, they ask for donations on a lot of this stuff. And what I offered to pay was more than I really wanted to pay. But I got this box set for $5. Not bad. It's clean. There's no chips or dents. But again, it's not a crazy expensive record. Both the background moods and the Sarah Vaughan box I found when I was entering them on Discogs, and they're not crazy expensive. People aren't beating down the doors to catch these guys. So where does that leave you? Now, my next idea was maybe Facebook Marketplace or things of that nature, Craigslist. I didn't find anything on Craigslist, but I did find somebody selling some things on Facebook Marketplace. Now, Facebook Marketplace is iffy at best. Sometimes, if it's local, they don't tell you the condition or they over exaggerate the condition, and you never really know. In fact, in this lot, I bought a couple things off someone selling them at an apartment complex. She had told me, I don't really collect records. I thought I'd try it. Now, this was a younger person, and it's just not for me, so I'm going to sell these. So I asked her, well, what do you want for those records? And she had 2 records, 3 records, I think. I ended up buying 2 of them, and I said, well, I'll take that one, depending on how much you want for it. And then she said, well, which one? And I said, this one. the Nirvana In Utero. Now, this is the 2013 mix. So I ended up getting this one from her. Now, this is the In Utero 2013 mix. This is when Steve Albini went back and decided he would make it sound more like the original version when he had mastered it and mixed it for Nirvana before they pulled a couple tracks. The label pulled a couple tracks and gave them more oomph, they thought, because those were the radio friendly hits they were looking for. I didn't have this. In fact, I don't own a copy of In Utero. I worked at a record store and I just heard it every day for what seems like forever. I would like to get a copy somewhere down the road, but this is what I stumbled across. Well, how much do you want for that? She said. Well, how much are you willing to pay for it? She said. I said, I don't know, what, $10? It's not mint. It's been played. She didn't have it in a protective sleeve and she didn't have it in an outer jacket. It was literally handing it to me, grease print fingerprints, and I didn't want to embarrass anybody. I didn't want to make the worst of it. And I kind of gave it a quick once over and said, okay, I'll give you $10. She said, fine. Do you want this other one too? I'll give you both of them. I said, what's that one? And I looked at it and it was a Florence and the Machine. Now it's downstairs. I gave it to my wife. I gave her my backup record player. And the reason I gave her that is because she doesn't really care about records or vinyl, but she likes every now and then to play something. She said she likes to see it spin. And she does like Florence and the Machine. Now I went downstairs, gave it to her. She pulled it out and said, oh, Florence and the Machine. Pulled it out of its sleeve, and there was a giant scrape all the way across it. I mean, a gouge. So I didn't really pay for it. I think I gave her another $5, so $15, but one of them was beat to hell and had a scrape in it. Now I'm starting to understand the problems with the small town I lived in. I wasn't a record store I could go back and go, here's your record, it's scratched. It wasn't even somebody off eBay that I could say, hey, this came scratched and you sold me and I need a refund. No, I was basically screwed. It was $5 I'll never get back. And so I paid $15 for this copy. It wasn't the end of the world, but I was learning where I now lived and didn't have a record store around me. Which brings us to my next spot. So I learned rather quickly from going to Facebook Marketplace or churches or that sort of thing that I wasn't finding what I was looking for. I wasn't having that itch scratched. So I thought, well, I've always heard and seen a few of them, antique malls. Now, sometimes antique malls can be hit or miss, and sometimes they can be completely miss. You know what I mean if you've hit antique malls. That being said, I tried the one antique mall that was near me. And then out in Odessa, where the record store was that closed, there was another antique mall. So within the span of several months, I eventually hit both of them a few times. Now, the one in Midland, it's overpriced. There's bad inventory. There's mangled, scratched records, and people asking way too much. Now, Midland is the larger of the two towns, and it's where the newer establishments are popping up. However, no record stores. So, Antique Mall it was. I kind of struck out at the one in Midland, but eventually found one in Odessa called Vintage Deluxe. Now, Vintage Deluxe is a antique store, and they have booths that they rent out to vendors, and they can sell their products and wares. They also have a section with records, cassettes, and CDs, both used and new. So that's ended up being my one saving grace. They're not huge. They're very fairly priced. And I've even given them a positive review online. I like Vintage Deluxe so much. I mean, aside from traveling outside into Dallas or Austin or Houston or New Mexico or Arizona, all which are things I just can't do at this point in time, I wanted something local. And Vintage Deluxe has turned out to be the best place for me. So antique malls can be hit if you find the right one. This store is the right one. They're very cool people. I've taken stuff in trade and gotten more products for stuff I didn't want anymore. I had been shipped a record from Interscope and I didn't know the plan and I didn't read the directions correctly. So I got a month after the 1 month that I only wanted and then canceled the subscription. So I got an Angels and Airwaves album that quickly went out of print and I had one. I didn't want it. I don't know anything about the band, nor do I care to listen to anything by the band. I'm not a Blink 182 fan either. crucify me now. That being said, I knew it had value. It sold out. I looked it up on Discogs. So I went to this store because they've always worked with me, and I worked out a deal in trade, which was fantastic. I got several records that I was going to listen to. And isn't that the point of this whole thing? Now, I didn't get these particular records at that trade for that record, but I have picked up a couple copies of things that turned out to be great. This was a copy of Steely Dan's Asia. Now, we all have this album if we're audiophiles, or you should own this album if you're an audiophile. I have a UHQR back there as well. But this was, I always look when I stumble across bands, I like, which copy is it? Now, this isn't a spectacularly rare pressing of this album, but it was clean, it was in good shape, and it was better than the one that I had. It was an upgrade. So for me, it was a win win. I also found an album that I never had, which was Rastaman Vibration by Bob Marley. That being said, it's a 1976 pressing, and it's a I don't know what the JV is. If you guys know what JV is, I know I asked him at the shop, but I can't remember at this point. Consider it a not mint, not near mint, but very good. I think it's a very good. And you can be a VG or a VG plus or a VG plus plus or a VG minus. I think this is their very good. And it is. It's a average, very good record. It's not super mint. It's not super rare. It does have somewhat textured cover, which is cool. I know you want to look for those if you were to get, depending on what you got, what pressing, when, you may not get the textures cover anymore. But this was a great buy, and I think this was like $10. So you can find things in antique malls, and sometimes you'll find the right antique mall. I just happen to have found the right antique mall. I can't go there all the time, but I do love going there. So when I have some money to spend and I'm local and I don't want to mail away for anything, I stop by there. Now, something else you can do is those similar kind of stores, but in other states. Now, this is from a company called Big Love Vinyl. You may have seen them on YouTube. Big Love Vinyl does online on a YouTube show where they'll show you new used pieces that they've got in. They also carry new vinyl at Big Love, and the owner walks you through in the video and gives you prices, and you can go and look through their inventory. And I love them. I think they're fantastic. They're the I have to mail away for equivalent of my local antique mall. So fun shop, greatly fun videos, really cool guy that owns it and runs it. Um, and you can look at YouTube and you can look up Big Love Vinyl, and he's got videos he does weekly of the new stuff he's got in. And if you got couple bucks kicking around, or like myself, I accept pay in Cash App or Venmo or PayPal. Sometimes it's just easier to do it all in the digital world and get your records mailed right to you. And he has a better selection than anything I seem to have around here, with the exception of the Antique Mall Vintage Deluxe. So Big Love Vinyl is another option. Now we're starting to move into online. You can find cool things local. You can find things online. What about stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit? Now, when I first started getting back into vinyl after the pandemic, I again went and looked on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. And I can't remember how I did it, but I saw somebody had posted pictures of a garage sale, and it was all kinds of things. And I saw stacks of records in the background. So I reached out. I think I emailed them and called them, and I said, "Are you still doing this garage sale?" Now, this place, I had no idea at the time, was about a 2 hour drive from me. I thought it was local Midland, but Midland really kind of extends out where people still consider it Midland. And this was close to a 2 hour drive to me there and a 2 hour drive to me back, which was even further than my drive to Vintage Deluxe in Odessa, the next town over, which took about an hour. So I said to my wife, "I'm going to go pop out." This was on a Sunday, and these people don't seem to speak English. And so I don't know how this is going to go. But I had a couple bucks cash in my pocket, and I thought I'd give it a shot. So I drove out, and long story short, one guy spoke English, and he started carrying out crates of records. I was shocked. He was pulling out some Bob Dylan's, he was pulling out some Stones, some Beatles, all the stuff you want to see. But here was the problem. Remember when I mentioned you could go on eBay or online and find records for sale? Same problem. This guy found that out too. And he seemed to think that every copy of Bob Dylan that he had, and every copy that he had of the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, was a $300 record. So after spending about an hour going through and creating piles for myself, and said, what do you want for these? He came back after doing some quick figuring with a number close to about $2,000. $2,000. I think I had $200 on me that day. Did not have $2,000. And long story short, what it was he had been pricing everything on eBay. He was not a record collector and he didn't know anything about condition. And so I tried to school him as best I could, separated a few I really wanted to get, and tried to offer him the cash that I had on hand. Now, I ended up getting a pretty good deal. I got about 25 records that day. They weren't anything out of the ordinary, anything crazy, mostly VG plus conditions, but it was stuff like Hall and Oates or Christopher Cross, stuff that I was looking for and I wanted a good condition vinyl for, but I wasn't about to spend crazy money that this guy was asking. What I did get in that group was I did get this Toots and the Maytall. This is Funky Kingston. This is a great album. And I'm a reggae fan. I don't have a lot of it, and I'm always looking to beef up my reggae collection. And this is a good one. I also found this copy of Miles Davis Bitches Brew. Again, not a crazy, super rare copy, but a good copy in good condition. I didn't have it. And so I got these two albums and about 24, 25 albums. And I think I gave the fella $100. I felt that was fair. I didn't have the time to teach him how Discog works, nor did he seem to want to know. Now, a couple weeks later, he did reach back out to me. And I said, if you ever want to sell these and they haven't been selling, give me a holler. I went back out there a couple weeks later and I tried to show him how Discogs works. I tried to show him how he could price them fairly and said, if you do this, you might end up with some more money. You could also do it online. He didn't do that either. So it was a complete waste that second trip. I was hoping to get a couple more records. So now I'm like, well, if local cats selling stuff at garage sales or like this gentleman on Facebook Marketplace doesn't work, if churches and resale shops don't work, what am I left with? So I decided I'd focus at this point on shops like Walmart. Now, if you saw my Fleetwood Mac video recently, I pointed out a crappy copy of Fleetwood Mac Rumors that I got. Now, if I had been into Discogs at that point, I might have been able to avoid that mistake. Discogs is pretty accurate when it comes to the stuff that you can see at your local box stores. That's the position I found myself in. So I'll try to look something up if I find it, or if it's a new copy and I can scan it with the barcode scanner, at least I know what I'm getting. But you guys that shop at Walmart, Target, that sort of thing, you know what to look for. You look for sales, you look for new releases, and you don't expect much. You're not going to find UHQRs. You're not going to find MoFis. You're not going to find used records. You're going to find a lot of copies of Taylor Swift, copies of Adele, copies of Tom Petty's greatest hits, that sort of thing. And sometimes those will work for you. I've got new copies of The Weeknd there. I've gotten a new copy of the Beatles reissues, the mono reissues. I got one at the local Target. So they can work. It's the same goes with Barnes and Noble. For me, they don't have at our location a very large selection, nor does the Target, nor does the Walmart. I'll be lucky if they have 100 records at any given point. They do not have huge, where I live, inventory. They just can't afford it. But what I did run into a few times at Barnes and Noble was their clearance, stuff that they ordered and didn't sell. Now, this is a guy I took photographs of when I lived in Detroit and did some photography. I photographed him for a cover of a magazine. Nice guy. And when I saw his album, Dear Life, in the clearance bin for $5 with an alternate cover, I was like, super cool. Yeah, I'm totally down for that. Now, This is a 2020 Third Man Records. I'm not a big Third Man Records guy. I don't think they got the best pressings. I've never been blown away by anything they put out. This is a good sounding record. It's a clean record. It's not an audiophile record. And honestly, I think Third Man's a little noisy. Correct me in the comments. I have a sleep box set that's okay. I just don't think it's crazy good. And I have an average system, but other stuff that's cheaper sounds better. But I digress. This is a $5 record that I got at Barnes and Nobles with an exclusive cover. And like I said, I like Brendan Benson. He's a cool guy. I've got to meet him and talk to him. And so, yeah, hell yeah. For $5, I'm all in. Now, I also found this $5 album. Sometimes I'll find them in the clearance there that I didn't know anything about them. I'll look them over. This was the soundtrack to Flag Day, also $5. A Sean Penn film. Now, it does have music on here by Olivia Vedder. Yeah, that's his daughter. Eddie Vedder, Cat Power, Glenn Hansard. So, it's not a chart burster. It's a $5 record to me. Maybe you like these songs more, but for $5, a good, clean new record when I don't have record stores around me, yeah, $5 I'll do it. And sometimes I'll buy their $5 and flip them or bring them to the other shop in Odessa, the Vintage Deluxe, and see if they'll give me trade for them. So it can work out to your benefit. At a recent stop at Barnes & Noble, I stumbled across this, also a $5 album, Liz Phair, Soberish. Now, for $5, again, Barnes & Noble exclusive. It's on blue vinyl. It's new vinyl. These albums are new sealed vinyl. This is not the sort of titles that you'll find at my local Walmart or Target. They seem to be a little more artist-centered. You'll find classier stuff at the Barnes & Noble. I think that goes hand in hand with the fact that they have a Starbucks in that. So they're trying to be a little classier. But again, it's a tiny selection. If Walmart or Target had less than 100, they at any given point might have less than 50. Sometimes I'm shocked at how bare it is and how the records are stacked or just falling all over the place. They don't seem to care. But sometimes I get $5 records. So what am I going to do? So those same stores like Barnes and Nobles, if they don't have $5 records, a lot of times they'll run sales, normally around the holidays. This was a Pearl Jam that I didn't have, Gigaton, and this was also new, also sealed, 25% off. So I think I ended up getting this one for, I think it was like $15, all was said and done. And new vinyl polyline sleeves. So yeah, I made out with that time. I'm a Pearl Jam fan. I got that one. But what if that's it? What if that's all you're finding? And that's not really an audiophile's dream. Well, then you're left to go online. Now, online has good and bad. I've had a lot of success online with companies like Mike's In Groove in Arizona. He will even clean them for you. He'll re-sleeve them for you for a price. But he has a great selection. But it's online. I can't go there. I can't flip through the records. But he has a great inventory and he digitizes a lot of it and it is online. So if you have the time, you can go through his pages much like you can at Big Love. And you can see what their inventory is and you can buy those things. Now, you don't get that instant gratification, but it's a great service to offer. And for people like me, maybe you, that's all we have. Now, the other option is the mass retailers, companies like Acoustic Sounds, of which I have some UHQRs, MoFi, of which I have two titles, I believe, maybe no, three titles. I have three MoFi titles. I'm not crazy rich, guys. I can't drop mad money on this stuff. And then occasionally you'll have sales. Now, recently, Waxwork had a sale, and Waxwork Records put up this sale over the weekend. And I collect a lot of their stuff. I'm a horror movie fan. I love soundtracks. It's always been my thing. So I decided I would take a look to see in their online inventory and see what they have. And they happened to have a title that had sold out. I wanted that sold out title because I have a story kind of connected to it. I'll say what it was, but just know this, there's going to be a follow-up video about it, and I'm going to unbox this, and I'm going to talk about that situation. What I'm talking about is the soundtrack to The Last Man on Earth. Now, The Last Man on Earth is a Vincent Price movie, and Waxworks put out a score to it tied to Rob Zombie. And that's where the story comes in. So it sold out. I never had the money to pick it up. They're not cheap. They're not super expensive. It's a great company. They have great product. And I love just about everything I've ever gotten from Waxwork. And if it had a problem, they fixed it. They sent me a new jacket or they sent me new vinyl. They're a great company. But again, you got to wait for it. But I did get this sold out Last Man on Earth soundtrack and was extremely happy. Now, here's the bad part, because they're shipping it to you depending where you live. You had hopefully better be home when your record is delivered. I had to go to work today. I had a tattoo appointment. My wife recently got a job. She works from home doing web work and she does advertising as well. In fact, she has about 4 jobs, to be honest. And she decided to help out with our bills that she would get another job, which is working at the local Michaels. So she wasn't at home. Now that left the horse in the pasture and the 2 cats inside, and they certainly weren't going to get any packages that were delivered. Now, like I said, I'm in Texas and it was hot today. It's generally hot up until late December. Sometimes it can be hot up until near Christmas. That being said, today was a hot day. It was in the 90s. And I hoped that nothing was delivered today. However, my FedEx on my email said, expect the package today. I didn't know what to do. And I prayed that the postman would put it in the shade. The FedEx drivers generally don't. Guess where this was coming from? Yep, FedEx. The last company I had deliver a record that was total. I'm talking torn into pieces and ripped apart. And that was after they went back to get the package and delivered it to my house, the right address, after having delivered it down the street to the wrong address. They sent a photo showing me it had been delivered, and I said, that's not my door. Made a phone call, and they delivered it to me several hours later. But again, I wasn't home, and the package was destroyed. So I was at work all day today, knowing this was going to be delivered and praying to God it didn't get destroyed. I got home, and there it was, tucked kind of in the shade by a bush, but upon picking up the package, it was hot. I mean, hot to the touch. So I'm hoping that when I open it, it's not warped or damaged. I don't know. At this point, I'm crossing my fingers. And that's basically my story for today. If you don't have options, these are the only options I see for us: ordering online or putzing around trying to find the right store. And luckily, I've got one on my way to work, Vintage Deluxe. I do have Target, I do have Barnes and Noble, and yes, I have Walmart. I don't really like to go to those places for records, but sometimes when I'm getting groceries or I'm buying some products for the pets, I'll flip through the record collection. Normally, I don't get anything, but there have been times. I'm mostly these days an online guy, and that's only because that's the selection that I can choose from. But then I run the risk of it being damaged in shipping. And I know I've seen your posts and posts in my groups that I'm in on Facebook about other people with the same damaged records. And who's to blame? Is it shipping? Is it the companies? I mean, I think we're figuring this out as we go along. That's my story for today. And until the next video where I show you what's in here and give you that little backstory on Rob Zombie, I'd like to say thank you for visiting and like and subscribe as always. I'm trying to build up to that 500 number, and then I'm shooting low to start with, guys. And hopefully I'll get there with your help. And I had a poll recently which said talk about more records. So here I am talking about more records. And thank you and thank everyone. And I will see you next time in the next video. And maybe I'll even say, waka 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 waka, waka 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 waka.